And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Collin Tipton, who writes, so it was announced yesterday that Mulan would be premiering on Disney Plus, yes, which we basically dedicated the whole show to, with a $30 price tag. It surprised me because I figured if they weren't doing that with New Mutants, then there's no way that they would do that with any of their major projects. But here we are. My question simply is, why didn't they choose to try this with New Mutants first? Thanks, and keep up the great work. All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yeah, listen, one of the things that a lot of people have been asking about ever since that news came out that they were going to be moving Mulan to Disney Plus first, where you got to be a Disney Plus subscriber and you got to pay a $30 fee on top of that. A lot of people have been asking the questions, well, why didn't they do that with this movie? Why didn't they do that with that movie? How come they didn't? Like, I've been getting a lot of messages asking about 30 or 40 different films. Why didn't they do this? But New Mutants is a logical one to ask about. Because New Mutants is a movie that literally finished shooting like almost 3 years ago. They started shooting the film almost 5 years ago, which is crazy. These kids are going to be bringing their grandchildren to the world premiere when it finally happens. But they do finally have a date. So why do something like this with Mulan and not with New Mutants? To me, there are two primary reasons. One reason is this, is that I think they knew that doing it with New Mutants really wasn't going to tell them anything. Like, New Mutants isn't a property that has a lot of following already. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that it's associated with X-Men, even though the movie itself is very, very loosely associated with X-Men anyway. So there's that. But, you know, it's not this thing like Mulan is a popular IP. It was a huge popular animated, blah, blah. It was going to be big. I don't know that Disney felt like we're going to learn anything by putting New Mutants on. Like, if nobody at all subscribes to it, that doesn't really tell us anything. And if 10 million people get it, that doesn't really tell us anything either. So number one, I don't think they felt like there was much that they could learn from it because it's a very different scenario than, say, Mulan is. It's also the fact that it's found money, right? Like, Fox paid for it all. This was just a part of the acquisition. This movie was shot by the time Disney picked up New Mutants. So there's that. Anything they get from a theatrical release is gravy to Disney at this point. The other thing, and I think this might be the bigger thing, is you got to remember, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Remember a couple of weeks ago, people were asking, do you think at Comic-Con they're going to announce putting New Mutants on streaming? And I said, well, it's possible, but one of the big hurdles of that is that they actually have some contractual obligations with people involved in the film that this film gets a theatrical release. That's not always put into contracts, but this was a big deal. We talked about this before, that New Mutants has contractual obligations with, I believe, the director, a number of the cast, a couple of the producers, that this film gets a theatrical release. So unless Disney wanted to step up, break out the checkbook, and write some big checks to people to forego a theatrical release, which just makes the movie more expensive for them, that was going to be not insurmountable, but a hard one to sort of overcome. Aaron, I know you weren't here yesterday when we were talking about the whole idea about Mulan moving, but when you think about, you know, the fact that they did choose Mulan to do this, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about, well, why did they choose Mulan instead of a movie like New Mutants?
I think you hit it right there on the head, because Mulan is really the litmus test. It is the big kahuna of what they have to offer that's on their slate. Mulan has, as you said, a much wider audience. And also, you know, for anybody out there who has kids, and I don't yet, but I am a godmother and auntie to many, many, many children all over the country. And the number one thing when it comes to any new Disney movie that comes out is the parents constantly saying, yep, I know every word of this movie because we have watched it 25 times. That is a movie that Mulan could be. Mulan could be the kind of movie that parents go, you know what, I'm willing to shell out $30 because, you know, as Tom and I were talking last night, he was like, $30, that's a lot. And I go, well, think about it. If it was me, you, and 2 kids plus, you know, soda plus bathroom breaks, it makes a lot more sense to pay $30 to watch it at home. But I'm sure you covered all that yesterday. The reality, though, is that if I'm a parent and I know that my kid is one of those kids who watches every Disney movie 20 times, I'm willing to pay that for Mulan because I know that we're going to get our money's worth. New Mutants, I don't necessarily know. I mean, what is the rating on New Mutants anyway? It's definitely not G.
No, it's PG-13.
Right. And so that's the thing, is that automatically that's a huge market. And obviously I know, before I get anybody saying it, I know that it's not just children that are watching, but I'm specifically talking right now about those parents that are going to go, you know, my kids aren't going to watch New Mutants, and they're not going to watch it 25 times.
Well, also because it's partially being described as a horror film. It's like a
exactly.
Comic book horror film, yeah.
You know, it just doesn't have as wide of a reach, and it's also like, I'll watch New Mutants. Will I watch it over and over and over again? Probably not. Whereas with Mulan, yeah, I want to see Mulan, but I also am going to want to rewatch Mulan whenever my nephews and my nieces come over. I'm going to want to rewatch Mulan whenever I'm with my godkids. You know, that's a movie that has the kind of staying power of being able to really get your money's worth, whereas New Mutants just doesn't. And I feel like, you know, this is one of those movies that, you know, they've held on so long. You might as well continue to hold on until you have the right scenario. And yeah, Disney paying extra money to get themselves out of a contract or to sidestep a certain aspect of a contract makes absolutely no sense. They are just going to try to they're going to try to squeeze any juice they can out of New Mutants at this point. That's possible, and they're definitely not going to want to lose money on it.
One of the other things about this too is that right now New Mutants, and they just did this, they just announced this at Comic-Con, they're keeping their August 28th release date. And, you know, how many, I mean, there are some theaters open in the United States right now. I think, you know, Robert and I are talking about this. It seems like I feel like they're just going to keep that release date and put it out in whichever theaters are available to be
Georgia.
Like Georgia, but also there's a number of other states. We went over the list of all the states that have some theaters open right now.
Right.
And because that does a couple things. Number one, again, they're just looking at any money they make on this thing in box office right now is just bonus at this point. The other thing is, it's kind of like an olive branch to the theatrical industry saying, hey, we're putting out a new movie in theaters, even though there's limited seating, all that kind. We're doing that for you guys right now. I feel like it's a little bit of an olive branch to the movie fans out there that do want to go to the movies, whatever. So I think they're still going to stick with that. And that's another reason why they do that. Anyway, the question. Go ahead.
Really quick, just to add on to that, to ask you if this is the same thing. You know how like when a movie wants to be an Oscar contender, sometimes they'll only theatrically release it in like New York and LA so that they have that. Is that sort of a similar thing? Yeah. Is that similar? Like, as long as they put it in certain number of theaters, they fulfill their contractual obligation and they can just throw it on the platform?
Oh yeah. That's definitely it.
Okay.
Like, once they put it in the theaters, thank you for clarifying. Then they can start, because right now, when they put it in theaters, they're going to have to then observe the theatrical window, which is 3 months, right? 90 days.
Right.
But they can't start that clock until they put it in theaters. So once they put it in theaters in August, they might just be thinking, let's get it into whatever theaters are out there on August 28th. That way we can start the countdown clock of the theatrical window. So in August, September, October, November. So by end of November, we can actually put it out on streaming, and we've fulfilled all of our contractual obligations. So that's one of the big things there. Question is for you guys. Why do you think maybe Disney opted to go with releasing a Mulan on Disney Plus as opposed to something like a New Mutants? Do you agree with our reasonings? Do you have some others? Jump down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.